Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Matt from Matt's Bookshelf, and today we are ranking the novels of one of the greatest American authors of all time, and that is F. Scott Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald is one of my favorite writers of all time, and one of the writers who got me into the classics, and is ultimately who can be thanked for why I made a YouTube channel or a BookTube channel in the first place. So, the works of this author mean a lot to me, and I want to rank them all from worst to best. So with that said, let's get into the video. Any rich, unprogressive old party with that particularly grasping, acquisitive form of mentality known as financial genius can own a paper that is the intellectual meat and drink of thousands of tired, hurried men. Men too involved in the business of modern living to swallow anything but pre-digested food. For 2 cents, the voter buys his politics, prejudices, and philosophy. This Side of Paradise is F. Scott Fitzgerald's first novel, and he wrote this book when he was 23 years old. It was a commercial success and put a lot of hype around the author that he would never really truly live up to in his lifetime. Of course, This Side of Paradise is no longer considered to be his most famous work, but at the time he was alive, he sort of never was able to recapture the financial success that he made from this novel. The novel follows Amory Blaine, a Princeton student, as he navigates the high society of college life. I ultimately ranked this novel as his worst book because it is very autobiographical, and by its autobiographical nature, it feels very random as a plot, very disjointed as a plot, and with the character of Avery Blaine and with the side characters of the novel, I had a very lot of difficulty relating to them due to the fact that this plot is very much F. Scott Fitzgerald kind of writing about what was going on in his life at the time, and therefore it feels very disjointed. That being said, though, there is still a lot to gain from this novel. The ending of the book is very good, in my opinion. I won't go into spoilers here, but it's a very good ending. And some of the character work for Amory Blaine really comes to head towards the end of the book. But I did ultimately feel like this book is just very wandering in its plot, and I really, compared to other books I've read by him, it definitely does not. I definitely feel like it's worthy of being placed at the bottom of the list. From down there, somewhere, ascended a faint sound of dance music. Nicole was up, in her head now, cool as cool, trying to collate the sentimentalities of her childhood, as deliberate as a man getting drunk after a battle. But she was still afraid of Dick, who stood near her, leaning characteristically against the iron fence that rimmed the horseshoe. And this prompted her to say, "I can't remember how I stood waiting for you in the garden, holding all myself in my arms like a basket of flowers. It was that to me anyhow. I thought I was sweet, waiting to hand the basket to you." Suddenly, there was a booming from the wine slopes across the lake. Cannons were shooting at hail-bearing clouds in order to break them. The lights of the promenade went on again. Then the storm came swiftly, first falling from the heavens, then doubly falling in torrents from the mountains, and washing loud down the roads and stone ditches. With it came a dark, frightening sky and savage filaments of lightning and world-splitting thunder, while ragged, destroying clouds fled along the past the hotel. Mountains and lakes disappeared. The hotel crouched amid tumult, chaos, and darkness. F. Scott Fitzgerald's Tender as the Night it marks his last completed novel, and is an expatriate novel taking place along the French Riviera. It follows Dick and Nicole Dyer, Dick being a brilliant psychiatrist and Nicole being his wife / former patient. And they are with a community of American expats along the French Riviera, and at one point, at the start of the novel, a young up-and-coming actress named Rosemary Hoyt joins their crew, and a relationship buds between Dick and Rosemary, and then this relationship brings ahead all the issues that these characters have in a very awkward but ultimately very compelling love triangle. Tender as the Night I would mark as being F. Scott Fitzgerald's most ambitious novel. There are several time skips, flashbacks, and it's broken up into multiple parts. The plot of the novel goes to many different places across different countries and continents. But ultimately, I would rank this as being F. Scott's second worst novel because, again, the autobiographical nature of the book ultimately holds it down. There are so many instances of what should be major plot points that are ultimately overlooked because they're just taken from F. Scott's own life and only incorporated there because because F. Scott Fitzgerald was going through the same thing. So there are huge events that happen that you think should be like climactic moments of the novel that are just kind of passed over, and ultimately as a narrative, I found it to be somewhat unfulfilling. But there is really excellent prose here. Again, I love expatriate fiction, and this is expatriate to the bone. It's filled with wandering, lost characters in the wakes of the horrors of World War One. There's a veteran in this book who is extremely mentally disturbed from what he witnessed during World War One, and also there's references to Ulysses as well as characters. There's a character trying to write his own version of Ulysses as well. So that was pretty cool. But so there is a lot to get here. And from the excerpt that I read, you would know that the writing here is great. It's just that the narrative is just so all over the place. Again, just like in The Side of Paradise, that ultimately, characters are dropped, huge plot points are dropped, and I was able to appreciate it more once I looked into F. Scott's own life and how it inspired this novel. But I also don't think that those events should be needed in order for me to enjoy the novel as a whole, because as a novel as a whole, I'm judging it just as the narrative. It just feels really all over the place. The motors were off, and all our five senses began to readjust themselves for landing. I could see a line of lights for the Long Beach Naval Station ahead, and to the left and on the right, a twinkling blur of Santa Monica. The California moon was out, huge and orange over the Pacific. However, I happened to feel about these things, and they were home. After all, I know that star must have felt much more. These were the things I had first opened my eyes on, like the sheep on the backlot of the old Lamely studio. But this was where Starr had come to Earth, after the extraordinary illuminating flight, where he saw which way we were going, and how we looked doing it, and how much of it mattered. You could say that this was where an accidental wind blew him, but I don't think so. I would rather think that in a long shot, he saw a new way of measuring our jerky hopes and graceful rogueries and awkward sorrows, and that he came here from choice to be with us to the end, like the plane coming home into the Glendale airport, into the warm darkness. The Last Tycoon is F. Scott Fitzgerald's last novel, and something that he wrote while working as a Hollywood screenplay writer in Los Angeles, California. The novel follows Monroe Starr, a Hollywood mogul who sparks a sort of forbidden romance with a British actress named Kathleen, who was in a relationship at the time, and also Monroe was previously married until his wife's passing. And at the same time, he is in a feud with another Hollywood mogul, and these tensions escalate through the novel to the point where they start becoming violent between both moguls' crews, if you will. Ultimately, this book is very predictable if you have read F. Scott Fitzgerald before, but I think the character of Monroe Starr really elevates the novel. He's very much a Great Gatsby type, and the fact that he fulfills that great man archetype, all the way down to the fact that both characters are romantic and have a romanticized view of the world to a fatal point. But Monroe is different in the fact that he was a married man, and you can kind of relate these things to F. Scott's own life, because at the time, Zelda Fitzgerald is in an insane asylum, and she's no longer with him. So whereas the wife of Monroe is dead, F. Scott Fitzgerald is dealing with a similar thing where he is also separated from his wife, who he's been married to for a long time, and is also F. Scott. If you look into the history as well, he started a relationship with another actress, and you can also feel like as Monroe is sort of realizing that he can love again, you get the sense that F. Scott felt very similar emotions too while writing the novel. And ultimately, I can praise The Last Tycoon because even though I was criticizing Tenders the Night and The Side of Paradise for being too autobiographical, the autobiographical nature of this book does not serve to completely change different plot points from like logical progression. It serves to elevate the background of the novel. So again, this takes place in Los Angeles. It takes place on Hollywood sets, which F. Scott had experience with, and his own experiences set to elevate the setting and the backdrop of the novel. Everything feels genuine here, and there's also some really good sardonic, self-detrimental sense of humor here, as there's a hack screenplay writer who says at one point, like, I would never put any of this crap in my books. So obviously referencing F. Scott Fitzgerald's lack of satisfaction with his screenplays versus the brilliance of his novels. And again, this novel is not finished, which is a tragedy in my opinion. There's very extensive notes on what where F. Scott wanted to go with the book. So honestly, like if this book was finished, like it may have ranked higher to me. It's more downplayed. The prose is way more downplayed here than it was in 10 Years a Night. He definitely strips down some of his more like elaborate prose here, but I think it's helped by really strong character work. And although I found the outline at the end to be satisfying, I do wish I was able to experience it in the way F. Scott intended for it to be. So ultimately, like Monroe Star, this book is a tragedy. There was music from my neighbor's house through the summer nights. In his blue gardens, men and girls came and went like moths among the whisperings and the champagne and the stars. At high tide in the afternoon, I watched his guests divide from the tower of his raft, or taking the sun on the hot sand of his beach, while his two motorboats slit the waters of the Sound, drawing the aquaplanes over cataracts of foam. On weekends, in his Rolls Royce became an omnibus, bearing parties to and from the city between 9 in the morning and long past midnight, while his station wagon scampered like a brisk yellow bug to meet all trains. And on Mondays, 8 servants, including an extra gardener, toiled all day with mops and scrubbing brushes and hammers and garden shears, repairing the ravages of the night before. This book needs no introduction. Any American probably was supposed to read this in high school, including me. This is one of the books that she read, which is a testament to how great it is, because I really did not read too much of what I was supposed to read in high school for English literature courses. Obviously, it follows the romance of Jay Gatsby and Daisy, the failed doomed romance, and I reread this book, and it just gets better on rereads. It's very short, which is to the book's benefit. It's more of like a novella than really a novel, but like every page has significance of some sort. Either it's brilliant prose, it's progressing the plot along in a satisfying way, or a combination of both. It's basically like a flawless novel in my opinion, just considering how short it is and how much gets across in like a small number of pages. This is like one of the go-tos to get into classic literature, especially American classic literature, because it's such a masterfully paced story. There's no fluff, and it's just great. And I could reread this book. I could reread this book like infinite amount of times, because you just can never go wrong with it. It's just a guaranteed good literary experience. That spring, that summer, they had speculated upon further happiness, how they were to travel from summerland to summerland, returning eventually to a gorgeous estate and possible idyllic children, then entering diplomacy or politics to accomplish for a while beautiful and important things, until finally, as a white-haired, beautifully, silkily white-haired couple, they were to loll about in serene glory, worshipped by the bourgeoisie of the land. The Beautiful and the Damned is why my booktube channel exists. I read this at the start of the pandemic because I felt like I had a lot of time to read a challenging book. And I bought it on a whim, basically, because I liked F. Scott Fitzgerald, but I didn't want to reread The Great Gatsby again. And so I just bought this book from Barnes & Noble, and, I don't know, it was fate. It had to have been fate, because I was captivated by this book. It follows a young couple, Anthony and Gloria, as they anticipate the death of Anthony's very rich uncle to take his inheritance. And as you can imagine, things do not go as planned. What I find most impressive about The Beautiful and the Damned is how it makes these characters, these protagonists, sympathetic. If you've watched any AuthorTube video about how to make a perfect protagonist, it's either make them relatable, make them like you. This book defies those rules and makes better protagonists than most other protagonists I've read across fiction. Anthony and Gloria are entitled, they are elitist, they are selfish, but it was through F. Scott Fitzgerald's ability to show them go through as their lowest lows and see them at their absolute worst as their plans, as you heard me read from the passage before. They have these goals that life's gonna be so easy for them, and then everything unravels, and you just cannot help but feel bad for them. And it's just masterful character work on Fitzgerald's part here. There are autobiographical elements again, but like with The Great Gatsby, like with Last Tycoon, it serves to elevate the backdrop and the setting of the book and not really impede upon the plot itself. This is a longer novel, and there are elements where it wavers a bit, but I ultimately found the character work to be so great here that I didn't mind the plot wavering. And also the fact that I feel like this is F. Scott at his boldest as well, both with making these characters, and also there are occasional instances of experimental prose as well here that I think really help elevate the novel. F. Scott, I think, was like 26, 27 when he wrote this book, and it just rings of youthful boldness, like a literary guy who understands how good he is and is willing to take himself to the next level. And that's what The Beautiful and Damned encapsulates for me. And I also have to say, like, the last scene of this book, there's no spoilers for plot lines in this video, but the last scene of this book is just excellence. It is one of the best last scenes I've ever read, and it, like, the emotion. So I read this book like almost 3 years ago, and the emotion I got while rereading the last page was basically like experiencing it the first time again. It has stuck with me for 3 years. It's just so well done, and it's such a fitting end for this book and for these protagonists. And if you're going to read any book from what I've been talking about today, The Beautiful and Damned is the way to go. And so that's my ranking of F. Scott Fitzgerald's novels. Let me know if you agree with my rankings. How would you rank his novels? What's your favorite F. Scott Fitzgerald novel? What other authors maybe you want to see me rank their novels for? I'm lucky in the sense that F. Scott only wrote 5 novels, so it's a lot easier for me to go with the works. But I'd be interested in doing more videos like this because I had a lot of fun outlining it. So yes, thank you. Let me know what you thought of the video, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Thank you, and goodbye.